Start the recorder. If this finds anyone besides me, know that I kept the rules until the night the fog learned my name. You can check the radio logs yourself, channel 16, 0217, within 6 miles of Greycap Light. I hailed the lighthouse because that is what you do when the horn goes blind and the sea goes still. The thing that answered used my voice. Not a trick of echo or wind. My voice, speaking from the stone. Maybe you've never worked a line alone at night. Maybe you think the ocean is a cartoon of waves and gulls, a harmless postcard. It isn't. It is a ledger that never forgets. I run the Miss Laurel, 32 feet of weathered fiberglass and stubborn luck. My father built her wheelhouse taller than it should be, said he liked to see the horizon coming. He taught me our water's grammar, the buoy bell's short sentence, the foghorn's slow prayer, the ways a motor sputter can mean repent. The evening started ordinary. 5 stacks of pots lashed, bait thawing in the stern, barometer sliding but not scaring me yet. I made St. Andrew's Cross with 2 fingers on the hatch because old habits smooth a sea faster than diesel. The forecast said drifting fog after midnight. It came early, thick as milk. Grew teeth. By 1:40, the horn at Greycap began its pattern, 2 long, 1 long, an odd cadence for that light. I chalked it to maintenance and stayed on course. At 0215 I throttled down to idle and called a Securite. Securite, Miss Laurel southbound abeam Greycap Light, reduced visibility less than 1 cable, speed 5 knots, any traffic advise, over. My voice sounded smaller than the fog. The radio hissed without answer. The horn kept its wrong sermon. I watched the AIS screen paint nothing but my own ghost. Then I saw the light itself, a pale coin smeared thin, the tower's blacker shadow, and something like a second halo behind it. I clicked the mic again to hear myself in the dark. Miss Laurel to Greycap Light, radio check, over. The reply came so clean it knocked the breath from me. Miss Laurel to Greycap Light, radio check, over, my own mouth said back, but the sound rose from the foghorn's throat and from the stone itself, a human timbre laid over machinery, a mirror with breath. I froze. The air smelled like split kelp and hot dust, like a summer attic. I should have killed the engine and drifted. I answered. Greycap, this is Miss Laurel. If someone is in that tower, key your mic silence, then my own voice bled out of the horn again, perfectly matched, inflection and all. Greycap, this is Miss Laurel. If someone is in that tower, key your mic. I swallowed and glanced at the clock. 0216. The little second hand stumbled and kept going. My father used to tell me the light remembers. He meant keep a respectful distance, not that the tower kept a copy of me somewhere in its damp heart. I tried again, switching to 13, then back to 16, thinking of ghost repeaters or some idiot playing games on the headland. The shoreline was gone. There was only the light. The halo behind it had grown. I put the bow toward it and eased forward, barely kissing 3 knots. The fog curled like muscle around the hull. Out of habit I counted seconds between horn blasts, but the pattern refused to settle. 2 long, 1 long, then a whisper like my name spoken in a classroom I hadn't seen in 20 years. Jamie. Nobody alive calls me Jamie anymore. The voice was the way I sounded when I still believed I'd be anything but a fisherman, when I still thought the world could afford to forgive. I told myself it was stress, the slow suffocation of fog, carbon monoxide whispering bad ideas into my skull. I opened the pilothouse window and let the cold wet slap my face. Then the radio squawked with a click that was not mine. Miss Laurel, you forgot the anchor light, my voice said from the speaker, and I knew exactly which night it meant. 17 years ago, I was 20 and sure of nothing. I'd fumbled my way home with a pocket flashlight and a pocket prayer. No one had seen. The lighthouse had. Something struck the hull then, no scrape, no crunch, just a soft, deliberate knuckle, as if a diver tapped for attention. The radar showed nothing. The depth sounder read 22 feet and holding. The prop wash feathered a pattern that looked, for a heartbeat, like the shape of a human standing under the stern. I killed the throttle, and the foghorn stopped mid-blast, smothered, as if a hand covered its mouth. Quiet rushed in so hard my ears rang. In that quiet, the tower spoke, roof to foundation, and it said my mother's lullaby. She used to hum it when storms banged our windows and power died and we turned bowls over candles to keep the soot off the ceiling. I hadn't heard that tune since she went into the ground. Hearing it come out of stone untied something in me I didn't know was knotted. I leaned forward and set my palm on the throttle, not to move, just to remember I had hands. The light pulsed twice. The halo behind it peeled wider, like a slit opening in a curtain, and I saw, far beyond the beacon, a sheet of darker dark moving against fog. It looked like a cliff and a night sky stacked where no land should be. I keyed the mic a final time. "Greycap, identify," I said. The tower answered with my voice, but not the voice I owned then. It was older, hoarse at edges, a man who had been shouting in another storm for too many hours, and he said, "Turn away." I should have thrown the helm hard over and obeyed the older me, but the sea punishes hesitation and defiance alike, and my hands did what habit trained them to do, they gripped, waited, measured. "Turn away," the voice had said, and when I didn't, the fog began to tally my life like a net full of writhing, familiar shapes. My father used to tell me there are 3 rules when a light goes strange: don't give it your name, don't look straight into the beam, and if the horn speaks anything but weather, you drop iron and let the world pass you by. I broke the first by hailing, flirted with the second by staring at that smeared coin, and now I reached for the third. I went forward into the wet and paid out the anchor until the chain sang, then set the brake and backed gently to bite. The bow yawed and settled, the road thrumming like a taut guitar string beneath my boots. For a long breath the horn went dumb and even the gulls, if any were nearby, kept their opinions to themselves. The radio clicked as if a finger tapped the squelch and my voice came through, a version from a night I didn't want remembered. "You lied about the storm to get out with her, Jamie. That was true and stupid and mine, and the light should not have known it. I hauled the chain one more link, a petty act to convince myself I was master here, and the winch handle kicked like a living wrist. The metal burned my palm, the chain was warming under no sun at all. Something down there had hold of the flukes and was drawing the Miss Laurel by inches toward the slit of light behind Greycap's crown. I went back to the wheel, put her helm to starboard, feathered the throttle, listened to the sounder tick 21, 20, 19 feet, impossible numbers this close to the tower unless the seabed itself was climbing to meet me. "Miss Laurel to any traffic," I said, voice even because fear likes to eat the truth before the air does. "Pan pan, pan pan, pan pan, vessel restricted in ability to maneuver in vicinity of Greycap Light, request any bearings, over." The radio rewarded me with my own cadence again, but the tape had slipped, the copy of me added a word I hadn't, and it chilled me worse than the fog. "Miss Laurel to any traffic," the voice said, cheerful and tired in equal measure, "Pan pan, vessel restricted in ability to remember," and then it laughed the way I laugh when I don't mean it. I almost bit through my own tongue. I've known fogs that play jokes, will toss your voice from cliff to cove until you're answering yourself, but this was not a joke. It was a ledger, as I'd said, and it had opened to the page with my name. The light pulsed twice, fast enough to pass for a blink, and the halo behind it uncurled further, revealing, I swear, steps cut into the air, slick and dark as drenched slate, leading down into a place that could not exist. On the 4th step stood a man with his back to me, black coat heavy with water, hair the color of iron filings, head tilted like he was listening for a particular wave. I knew the angle of those shoulders. The tower spoke with my voice again, older, worn through, and said my father's name like a curse and a prayer. I threw the horn switch and gave 3 short blasts, danger, 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 and something answered from below the keel in a thud that pushed air through my teeth. The compass card jittered south, then east, then spun like a kid's toy before catching on north again as if north had changed its mind. I dragged the chart book onto the console, even though I know these waters in my bones, and traced the 9-fathom line with a shaking finger. Keep Greycap a quarter off the starboard bow, follow the contour, don't let the slit widen in your window. That became the gospel of the next 5 minutes. I spoke out loud every mundane thing I could think of as I worked, because I had a sense, half sailor's superstition and half animal warning, that the thing in the stone could eat memories but choked on what was still happening. Engine at 800, I said. Helm 2 spokes to starboard. Sounder reading 18. Coffee tastes like rust and clove. There's a chip out of the wheel where Dad slammed a hook once and swore he'd sand it, never did. Every time I gave the present a sentence, the echo from the light stumbled, repeated a word, got less sure of itself, as if it had to wait for me to put the thought down before it could pick it up and use it. The chain kept heating. I smelled metal and the sweet gut sour smell of baked bait. The doghouse window beaded and ran like we were underwater already. Jamie, the tower called in my voice like mockery and concern braided tight, Jamie, you're burning, bring her home. I thought of our kitchen clock stopping at the exact moment the phone rang with the news about Mom, and I almost cried because grief is an old, efficient thief. I didn't cry. I pulled the hatchet from its clips by the companionway and leaned out over the bow, the fog soaking my shirt in a slap, and started chopping at the nylon road just above the chain splice. Each swing rang along the links and into my bones. On the third blow, the rope fibers snapped with a sound like someone inhaling sharply, and the bow sprang aside as if a hand let go. The halo narrowed, the steps dissolved, and the lighthouse said my name in the exact tone my mother used for rainbows. I ignored it. I shoved the throttle just enough to feel the prop bite and kept the beam of the tower just off the quarter, making distance by inches. The slit narrowed with every yard, but it didn't vanish, it tracked me like a pupil does a fly. The radio changed tactics. United States Coast Guard, a voice announced without sector, cadence wrong, this is a safety broadcast for vessels in the vicinity of Greycap Light. It used my mother's timbre, then my father's cough, then a girl who once waited for me on a pier I never returned to. I pulled the mic from its cradle and dropped it in the drawer with the flare gun, shut it on the cord. The horn didn't need a radio. It wore the lighthouse like a throat. Present tense, I told myself, and fed it facts like stones. RPM 900. Wake flat. The mug is chipped where the handle meets the belly. My left boot leaks. I am alive and not yours. A shape stepped again onto the air-cut stairs inside the halo, and this time he faced me. The heavy coat was mine. The nick at the eyebrow was mine. The scar on the thumb from a gaff slip in '09 was mine. He lifted his hand, palm open, like a man begging not for mercy but for silence, and I read the sentence he didn't speak, don't let it have your name. I had already given it. But names can be taken back if you're willing to be something else. I wrenched the name boards from the cabin sides, fiberglass screaming under the screws, and threw them into the sea. I pried the brass letters from the transom with the marlinspike until my hands were raw and then leaned out and scraped the ghost of Miss Laurel with the knife, white curls of paint drifting like fish scales. I took duct tape and a marker and wrote N.O. man, N.O. vessel across the compass hood. I said it out loud 3 times, because sailors and devils both understand threes. This is no man. This is no vessel. This is no name. The tower blinked. The horn stuttered. The halo pinched small as a coin. The copy of me on 16 tried to find purchase and fell over its own words, this is, no. No. I aimed for the bell buoy. When its shape loomed black and honest and close enough to touch, the fog thinned to a salt rain. The sounder steadied at 24. The compass held north the way it should. The steps were gone. The man in the coat nodded once, like a fisherman does at another in bad weather, all the benediction were allowed, and the slit in the light sealed as if it had only been a breath on glass. Securite, stations. This is the vessel once called Miss Laurel. If you hear my voice from Greycap, it isn't me. Do not name yourself. Drop iron. Turn away.